Okay, so again, welcome everyone. If you didn't hear, my name is Taryn May. I'm the online events coordinator for the Human Health Project. And this is How Real World Data is Transforming Healthcare, a live panel event with a special emphasis on migraine. And we have some wonderful speakers for you today, but we're gonna start off by watching a video that our Human Health Project team has put together on our real world data and research. So you'll give me 1 second and I will start that screen.
Real-world data is an umbrella term for various types of data derived from sources outside of conventional, randomized, controlled trials. It is often defined as data that goes beyond what is normally collected in Phase 3 clinical trials in terms of efficacy. It is also often labeled as anything that is not interventional. Real-world data can be collected from a variety of sources, including electronic health records, insurance claims, disease registries, and patient-generated data, such as surveys and data gathered from mobile devices. If you have ever taken a health survey, tracked your fitness or sleep patterns, you have participated in collecting real-world data. Randomized controlled trials, or RCTs, have been the gold standard for developing and evaluating new drugs and devices for many years. In recent times, however, there has been a drive towards collecting and using real-world data rather than focusing only on critical trial data alone. Most clinical trials are strictly controlled with specific inclusion and exclusion criteria and investigate carefully defined patient populations. In contrast, real-world data comes from sources that are outside of a controlled clinical environment. The data is obtained from a broad patient population, including patients who are older or have a more advanced form of a disease. Therefore, it is more representative of the entire population. Used together, both real-world studies and clinical trials contribute to the understanding of a treatment or of a disease. They are complementary rather than substitutes for one another because they provide data from different settings. Many healthcare decision makers are developing policies that integrate evidence from different sources. It is becoming more understood and accepted that other sources of data can contribute in important ways to the evidence base. Real-world data and real-world evidence are used by stakeholders in different ways. For example, it gives the pharmaceutical industry insight into how their drugs are being used. Everything from identifying unmet patient services to designing clinical trials. This industry is a big consumer of real-world data. Payers use this data to help manage the cost of care and evaluate outcomes from treatments. Healthcare providers improve the delivery of care by gaining a deeper understanding of patients, diagnosis, and treatment plans. Regulatory authorities use it to make regulatory decisions by monitoring post-market patient safety. Lastly, patients, as the source of data, benefit from more data openness and availability, which enables innovations in healthcare, such as personalized medicine. Real-world data forms the basis for real-world evidence, which refers to evidence about the risks and benefits of a product derived from analysis of specific real-world data. Collecting real-world data can be beneficial for a drug development program at any stage, from the early planning phases right through to late-stage clinical trials, and can be used to inform and improve the drug development process for a new or existing treatment. Real-world data can also help inform decisions about medical device development and usage, and can be leveraged by payers, hospitals, physicians, and patients to make evidence-based decisions regarding the use of new technology and its value to patients and health systems. Clinical trial data cannot answer every question about how a treatment will perform in the real world. This is where real-world data can play a unique role. Real-world data complements data collected in clinical trials, since it is derived from a broad range of individuals' experiences in the real world. Real-world data can provide valuable information about the effectiveness of a treatment across diverse populations. This data can then be used in drug development and in discovering new uses and treatments. The Human Health Project's Real-World Data Program collects data from HHP members and shares this aggregated and de-identified information on the HHP website. This peer-to-peer health information provides individuals with knowledge from others who have real-world experience with similar health conditions. This information also enables HHP members to compare outcomes between a broader range of treatments, including pharmaceutical drugs, over-the-counter medication, natural, complementary, and alternative treatments. Even simple lifestyle changes are compared to other treatments to provide a more whole-body perspective. The Real-World Data Program is also connected to other HHP programs, such as the Peer Support Program and the Learning Academy. Through the combination of HHP programs, people are better equipped to make more informed health decisions for themselves and those in their care.
Okay, so thank you everyone. And I'm going to turn it over now to Dr. Phil Harrington, the founder and CEO of HHP. And also while Phil's talking, I'm going to go ahead and put the link to our migraine real world data in the chat for everybody. So over to you, Phil.
Thanks so much, Taryn, and thanks so much to everybody for joining us today, and especially to our three speakers, Jamie, Liz, and Kelly, who I'll be introducing again just before they speak. Just a little bit of background on Human Health Project. About 25 years ago, just after I had moved to Los Angeles from Ireland, I got sick and spent 3 years going around in circles trying to get a diagnosis. Because I was new here, had more like a non-medical person kind of experience. And in the end, actually, it was my sister who I was talking to in London who wondered if I had the same thing as her. And that's how I got the diagnosis. And the last 2 years of being sick, I was in the twilight zone, where everything was very, very difficult and very difficult to work. Luckily, I was able to get better, and that's what sparked the idea for HHP. So our mission is promoting peer-to-peer healthcare, people helping each other with 3 pillars: information, primarily that being the real-world data that we just saw the video on, education, which is the work that's going on through our Learning Academy, and then support, which is going on through partners in patient advocacy, peer-led patient advocacy. We have a pilot program running in Belfast with Mindwise, which is the biggest mental health charity in Northern Ireland. And we look forward to bringing that to many more people through partnerships. We also include the real world data and the education, the Learning Academy in the partnerships. And then the other side, in complementary to the partner side, is the online side, where we have the Learning Academy, the real world data, and also as well where people can support each other. So that's just a little background, guys, for you on Human Health Project. We have a charity in the US, and we have a charity in Northern Ireland, and we have a charity in the process of being formed in Ireland. And our plan is to grow into other territories and other partnerships in the future, going forwards. So I'll now introduce. So we have our three speakers today. We have Jamie, who is in the Washington, D.C. area. Then we have Liz, who's in Hawaii. And then we have Kelly, who's in the Los Angeles area. And I'm going to, each speaker will have about 10 minutes to speak. And then when we're finished that, we'll open it up for questions. And we will finish, right on the hour. We'll finish right on the hour term. We'll make sure that we finish on time. So I'm now going to hand over to Jamie, who's going to share her history and also as well her experience with treatments, and in particular, where she sees where real world data is of use. Thanks, Jamie. Over to you then. Thank you so much for speaking.
Thank you. Thank you, Phil. It's a pleasure to be here today. Again, my name is Jamie Sanders, and I've been living with migraine for 38 years. I've had migraine since I was 2. It started with abdominal migraine, and I had my first migraine attack at the age of 8. And I was lucky enough to get a diagnosis at that age. That's very rare for children, especially a brown girl in New York City to get a diagnosis in 1986. That's quite a rarity. But I did get a diagnosis of migraine at the age of 8. And migraine has pretty much stuck with me throughout my life. My doctors did give me a sense of hope. However, as a child and as an adolescent and teen, they told me I would outgrow migraine by the time I turned 18. Obviously, that was not the case. I thought migraine had an expiration date, which it did not. It continued to remain about, episodic, just a few attacks per month, but they were quite debilitating. And when I was in my 20s, during my last pregnancy, I experienced my first intractable migraine. So intractable is pain that lasts, or migraine that lasts longer than 72 hours. And it was refractory. Nothing would stop the pain from occurring. And since I was in pregnancy, there really was a limit in what I can use to abort the pain. And that was quite devastating for me. I thought that this was something different because the first time I experienced pain at that level for that amount of time, had an MRI done and was expecting something different than saying this was just migraine, which was quite defeating because there's not quite much I could do about that. But since that experience with that first intractable migraine, it just was not the same for me after that. Each attack after that came very quickly, lasted longer, they were more severe, and was less responsive to the typical over-the-counter medications that I would normally take, and was able to get back to life after a couple hours. And so by the time I was 27 years old, I became chronic, experiencing 15 or more headache days per month. By the time I was 30, I had new daily persistent headache and chronic daily headache on top of that. Treatments were very difficult as my migraine was just not responsive to a lot of therapies. It was just very, very difficult to treat. And throughout this process, I became intractable again and refractory, and I stayed that way. And I've been that way for over a decade. And it's been quite a challenge to try to find a therapy or a combination of therapies to bring me back to a level of where I can function and have a better quality of life. So it's been quite challenging. Some of the treatments that I've been on over the years, I've been on antidepressants for prevention, anticonvulsants or seizure medications, blood pressure medications. I even got as far as getting a neurostimulator implant over my supraorbital nerves, which are the nerves right over your eyes, because that's where I experienced my pain. And I had that for about 5 years until that stopped working. So I, did quite intensive things for pain relief, which unfortunately either they just were not effective. I couldn't tolerate them, or there were quite a few allergies to a lot of medications. Right now, what does work for me is a multitude of therapies. I have to do a combination of things. Cryotherapy or ice therapy, heat therapy, acupressure and acupuncture, especially if I stack that with massage therapy, is very beneficial for me. Botox and nerve blocks every 3 months is a must. Otherwise, I'm in a much more severe level of pain on a daily basis. Cognitive behavioral therapy with a pain psychologist is very helpful as well. Mindfulness every day, having a good sleep hygiene, managing my diet and managing migraine triggers is very important. Neuromodulation devices like Stephaly or GammaCore, those things are really, really helpful for me. And when things get really, really, really tough and I'm stuck in a high pain cycle, which I'm currently in and have been in since the end of January, then going inpatient for DHE infusions, which take about 3 to 5 days to break that cycle. It's a tough thing to go through, but it helps. And that's a protocol I have in my back pocket if I need it. Real world data, to me, is an important piece to any chronic illness, and quantifying how that experience affects other people that live with that. Especially in my particular case and how I work with other organizations in the migraine and headache space, and looking at health disparities and racial disparities. Real world data can help disseminate how many marginalized groups, specifically BIPOC, Black, Indigenous people of color, live with migraine and severe headache because they are just underrepresented in clinical trials. And so having real world data to help see exactly how many people in those groups are actually affected will help get us a better number, because right now it looks like the prevalence rates are about the same, but in some of the epidemiology reports that we do have, they are affected disproportionately due to severity, frequency, and chronification. So this would give us a better insight into that. Also, it would be helpful to see how many people actually live with intractable or refractory migraine. Right now, we just see episodic and chronic, but we really don't have any numbers to see how many people like myself are out there, and that would be interesting to know. So those two aspects of real world data, I think, would be really quite interesting to see and plug into the data that we already have. Thanks.
That's great, Jamie. Thank you so much for that, for sharing your history and also your treatment experience and your insights to do with real world data. That was wonderful to hear and really inspiring. Thank you so much. We're going to move on now to Liz. So over to you, Liz. Thank you so much again for speaking today and sharing your experience.
My pleasure. Hi, everyone. Thank you for being here. So when thinking about my experience over the years with migraines, I realized that for whatever psychological or social or whatever reason, I have been fighting the notion that I could actually just have migraines without there being an underlying cause. So for most of the last 25 years since they started, I worked diligently and to basically no avail to find a solution to whatever I thought was the reason I was getting my debilitating headaches. When I first moved out to California from the East Coast in 1995, I started noticing the headaches I had always had on and off were becoming much stronger and more frequent. I remember one day I was driving from my then small children to school. I was driving about 10 miles an hour and I hit a car that was just parked there on the side of the road because my head hurt so much and I guess I wasn't paying attention. I immediately thought of allergies, as I've always had hay fever. I figured it must be different trees and grasses than I was used to. So I went to an allergist, skin tested me for everything under the sun. I ended up giving myself shots 3 times a week for 5 years. I took every allergy medicine that there was. My eyes stopped itching, my nose didn't run, but my headaches remained. Next, I concluded it must be because there's something wrong with my neck. I went to my chiropractor. The orthopedist said I had stenosis and I had a steroid shot in my neck, and I did a year of physical therapy. My back felt good. My shoulder nerve pain was gone. My headaches were not. I then tried a neurologist. She said, drink more water. So I tried. She told me it could be that I clenched my jaw. So I went to a dentist. He gave me a mouth guard. The little lines on the side of my tongue from clenching got a little better. My jaw felt generally more relaxed. Headaches continued. Finally focused on stress and my general on and off anxiety. I went on a low dose anti-anxiety med. I signed up for meditation, mindfulness training. I meditate every day. I journal. I think of things I'm appreciative of. I make sure I'm in supportive relationships. I exercise. I've cut out sugars, carbs, etc. And all this, I still get a migraine 2 or 3 times a month. They say the first part of helping a problem is recognizing that you have a problem. So finally, I have come to realize that I get migraines. I could have clued in a little more, as my aunt got them, my grandmother got them, and my son got them as a child. So for the first time, I've recently tried to address the problem of migraines in isolation from all other things. If I get one, I do not call the doctor anymore asking for antibiotics, for which I'm sure I have a sinus infection. I do not spend an hour stretching my neck. I take an Imitrix, I drink a lot of water, I lie down in a dark room and let it ride itself out. Because of my history, Human Health Project real world data came at a really good time for me, because I was completely open to learning what others have experienced and learning from them, and welcome ideas that might help me. I carefully reviewed the HHP migraine data several times, and here are some thoughts I had after reviewing it. 1, unfortunately, no one has found a magic cure. A lot of people are suffering. That's the bad news. 2, there are options, including prescription over-the-counter alternative therapy, that are definitely helping people. It may be they're helped slightly better, in some cases much better, but there are options to try. So if a migraine sufferer, you have never tried massage, yoga, or certain medication others have had some luck with, this data is really helpful to show you that there are some more options. I have only tried one other medication other than Imitrix, which was Elavil, and it made me basically non-functioning. But I might try one of the other ones that other people have had success with. I'm not a marijuana user, but perhaps I should keep an open mind, as others have had success with cannabis. Also, I feel that the real world data is helpful because it makes you realize that you're not alone on this journey, that you're part of a larger community that's suffering, but trying to help each other. So I feel that the 2 basic main things about the real world data that are helpful for people are to see what other options there may be for treatment, but also to feel like there's a community out there.
That's great. Thank you so much, Liz.
Thank you.
I really appreciate you sharing your experience and your information on your treatments and real world data. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Now we're going to move to Kelly, who's in Los Angeles, and Kelly is going to share her experience. So over to you, Kelly. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Phil, and hello to everyone. So I have some of my stories are, similar to, Jamie's and Elizabeth's, but I'm like that rare, extremely odd patient that, doctors get told about in medical school that, less than 1% of your patients are going to do this, this, and that. Well, that is me. So I've had headaches for as long as I can remember. Finally, at the age of 5, just keep in mind, this was in the early 70s. At the age of 5, they started doing, they did their first test. And I don't know how many of you were, they had these little electrodes and they glued them all over your scalp. So, because kids don't get headaches. So they figured that it was a brain tumor, it was something. Well, it wasn't, they couldn't find anything. So I continued to get headaches. But in the 70s, they didn't ever diagnose anyone with migraines. And if they did, it was always typically only a female, and it was always attributed to hormones. But because I was having migraines at, 5, 6, 7, and 8, they just said, we don't know, she seems to be perfectly healthy. So as and they wouldn't give me anything. The only thing I could take was, baby aspirin. Finally, at the age of 12, I got an actual diagnosis because, now, now we're in, 1981, that was migraines, and they were going to start to try to put me on some type of medication. And at that time, they were only giving 12-year-olds like Tylenol with codeine. They were just starting to come out with what they called preventatives, which didn't really work for me either. Actually, no medications have worked for me. I tried a lot of them, even Imitrex, which was supposed to be the newest one, as time progressed, didn't work for me. I had horrible side effects. I am hypersensitive to most medications. I've had a battery of allergy tests for both food and environmental triggers. I am not allergic to anything that anyone can think of. So after years of trying to do certain medications and preventatives and biofeedback, I just said, forget it. At about the age of 16, I convinced my doctor to prescribe me Furanol with codeine 3. I don't know if any of you know what that is because it's such an old medication. So I got that, and that worked for a time being, but it basically knocked me out. And I didn't want to be knocked out. I was 16 years old. I wanted to be able to have fun, but I was having migraines that would last 3 and 4 days, almost weekly, where I had to be in complete darkness. And that's not really a life for a teenager, especially a teenager growing up in Los Angeles. So I just decided I'm not going to do anything. No more medications, no this, I'm just gonna muscle on through it. I tried all the different diets that we always would do in Los Angeles. I'm going to be vegetarian, then I'm going to be, vegan. I'm going to, do everything to, make it stop. Consequently, when I did stop eating meat, my headaches did go away. But to have that kind of diet, it's a lifestyle. That led itself into a whole other problem because I was depleting myself of protein, which when you suffer from migraines is a key factor in stopping them, to have some type of high protein, in your diet, regardless of what it is. So I gradually went back to that. The migraines went away, like just disappeared for a few years. And I thought, oh, well, maybe I did finally grow out of it like the doctor said I was. But then they came back. They were coming back just as frequently and just as aggressively as they, had before. So that's when I started on the different regimens with the Imitrex and different preventatives. I'm not a very compliant patient. So the preventatives, even when I, did utilize them religiously for 3 weeks, they just still did not work for me. So what I decided I was going to do is look into everything alternative, acupuncture, acupressure, massage, yoga, having a regular sleep and wake, sleep time and wake up time. That has helped. What helps me the most is doing collectively the massage, the yoga, acupressure, and reflexology just on my hands and feet. And I know that at times that's not always feasible or cost effective. But my most recent diagnosis was vestibular migraines. I don't know if anyone knows what it is, but they're migraines associated with vertigo. And has also graduated into numbness and tingling and what feels as partial paralysis to my facial muscles and upper limbs. So I'm on my 6th neurologist right now with UCLA. So for me, real world data right now, the best thing is who else has these strange atypical symptoms, and what is your doctor, what are you doing? Because right now I am open to suggestions, seeing how I am back up to about 12 migraine headache days a month, and medication does not work for me. So me being able to read people's blogs and other information, I think might help my current 6th neurologist I'm working with right now come to a conclusion, because I, with COVID, have not been able to do my alternative therapies.
That's great, Kelly. Thank you so much for sharing your experience there. Really appreciate it. So at this point, Taryn, will you open it up for the Q&A now, or would you like me to lead that?
Sure, I'm happy to do that. So if anyone would like to unmute yourself and ask a question to one or all of our panelists, you're welcome to do that. You're also welcome to put a question in the chat and I can ask it for you. So does anyone have any questions for any of our panelists or even for Phil about their experiences or HHP's data? Yeah, Kim, go ahead.
Hi, I have a question for Kelly. Do you have the numbing and tingling in your face all the time, or is that when you get a migraine?
It's usually when I have a migraine, when it's coming on really strong, and it will typically happen. I actually wake up with the numbness. The first time it happened, I actually thought I had a stroke, a TIA in my sleep. But it happens about day 2, and it subsides fairly quickly, but it's still very odd. The facial one just subsides quickly, but I still get it in my hands and arms for about 2 to 3 days after the migraine.
So it's not an aura before the migraine, it's while you have the migraine?
Yeah, sometimes I'll get the numbness, I'll feel like the weakness prior to, but that's usually associated with when I can tell that my vertigo's coming on. Like, but it's not, and it's not every time, but when I get it, it's pretty drastic.
I'm asking because my daughter has it all the time. She has a daily migraine that hasn't gone away in almost 10 years, and she has these visual aura all the time, basically visual snow all the time, and then she has the sensory aura all the time, even when she it's just daily, it's all the time, her face, her hands, her feet. So I was just curious how yours was with that. Thank you.
So I can tell you that they have told me that the class of drugs, the triptans, don't respond to these types of migraines. And I am now in the process of, the next step is to do a spinal tap, because they're going to be checking me for what's called, I think, and I may correct me if I pronounce this wrong, Phil, the Guillain-Barré syndrome. Because when I was in college, I ended up contracting Epstein's-Barr virus, which is basically, they started calling it like chronic fatigue, and now Epstein's-Barr virus is its thing, and that's all associated with it. But I had migraines for almost 2 decades before I ended up being diagnosed with Epstein's-Barr virus.
So are they checking for a leak?
I don't know. They're
Thank
checking
you.
for everything, I believe.
Okay, well, thank you so much, Kim. And we have a couple of more questions in the chat that look like they're kind of directed toward any of our panelists. So Eileen is asking, what type of treatment comparisons do you think would be most important to compare? She says, with migraine, it seems really complicated since there are only a few approved treatments and then dozens of meds that we borrow from other conditions, that kind of off-label usage. So I don't know if any of you want to take a stab at that one.
I can. I mean, I think you really need to find what works for you, since pharmaceuticals have not really been successful in my case. And I sold pharmaceuticals and capital equipment for 5 years. So I'm very familiar with getting down to the bottom of what, their white papers and what they do. So, for me, I just found what works for me. Being either in a dark room, getting your most comfy blanket. If I can get to reflexology or massage, then that's what I'll do, and that's what helps ease my pain. And if I need to, I will take you know, one of my medications, but that's me.
I think
would
it would
also-
be helpful. I'm sorry, can I
No.
can I take a stab at that?
Yeah, go for it.
I think it would be helpful if the real world data would compare the efficacy of stacked treatments, especially for people with, you know, at the higher frequency end of episodic migraine and chronic migraine, who have to utilize more than one type of treatment to manage their migraine. So if you're on a CGRP MAB and you're also on Botox and get nerve blocks, like what is the efficacy of having all of those three compared to just being, say, on Elavil for your prevention? Maybe that type of comparison is what Eileen's talking about. I think that would probably give people a better idea of, like, there's more than one specific option for you, and doing multiple modalities of treatment tend to be more effective. Even for, like, people, say for myself, I'm like you, Kelly, where I just don't respond to medications. They just don't work for me. But I still have to kind of stack a lot of things in order for me to be functional. So, you know, for others like myself who are intractable and refractory, I can still live my life because I have to do X, Y, and Z. So it's helpful to know that those options are out there for people like myself or anybody else who have a more disabling form of migraine, or even those who are just episodic and have just a few attacks per month. There are options out there. So having a comparison between groups of medications or classes of medications might be helpful to show.
Thank you so much, Jamie. Oh, I'm going to let Liz answer that question as well in just 1 second, but I want to direct everyone to, I put it earlier in the chat, and then Phil also just put it in the chat, so it's at the bottom, but on HHP's migraine data page that he linked, there's a drop-down menu on the left-hand side of the screen, and there are different, you can see what the most common treatments are that people have responded that they've tried. And it breaks it up into over-the-counter medications, you know, natural and alternative treatments, and then prescription medications. So that might be something to look at, and you can see what kind of the most common treatments that people try are, and go from there. And then Liz?
I was just going to say that I think we could dig a little deeper on some of the alternative treatments, because they really seem to be helping people to some extent, but I guess more questions around, what does it mean to have acupuncture? Do you have to have it, you know, how many times till you start feeling better, or how often should you be doing meditation, or, you know, just some more data around those alternative treatments. What does it mean, massage, in the context of a migraine, etc.
Well, I think, you know, for me, like when Jamie was talking about stacked treatments, I am on a vitamin regimen with a lot of Bs. And I know that for some people it increases their headaches, but what I found with one doctor is, what they said to me is, when you're on a B and a vitamin regimen, you have to be very careful with the multivitamin that you piggyback that with, because it actually can increase your migraines, because that's what it did with me with the first time. So I had to switch to, they're called Smarty Pants, which I know you can get everywhere. They're typically for women. I think they have a men's formula, but for women, and they have prenatal. And that one actually helped with my migraines. So when I take those every day, well, when I try to take them every day at the treatment, and I walk, I still try to get some acupuncture at least once a week. And then reflexology. That has helped me the most, but when it doesn't, I've often stacked it with muscle relaxers because of the neck pain that comes with migraines before I go to my migraine medication. And then on the plus side, with the medication I'm taking, which is 100 years old, the furanol codeine, it is safe and effective to take regular Tylenol to piggyback it with it and in between for breakthrough pain. So rather than having to take 2 or 3 of them, I can take 1. But I mean, that's something that I go to first. And if it doesn't work and it's just irretractable and there's nothing I can do, I just have to write it out. So that's my alternative, my pharmaceutical and alternative method.
Yeah, and Eileen also in the chat brought up a good point about, you know, maybe if we could collect some real world data and group it by, you know, specific symptoms, you know, and kind of group people in that way and see what treatment works for people that have which kind of symptoms. I don't know, Phil, if that's already in the migraine data. I suspect it might be, but something interesting. Oh, I see, Phil, you also just responded to Eileen as well. And then we have a couple other questions in the chat. And I think I'm going to let Phil answer the question about any gaps in treatment, although I think he may have responded in the chat. But Nancy has a good question about for the panelists about how have your migraines affected your work life? If you are employed, has your employer been understanding about your situation? I don't know if anyone wants to take a stab at that one.
Sure, I'll jump on that. I have not been able to work in the traditional sense. I had filed for Social Security disability back in 2005 because I just was unable to work because of the severity and frequency of my migraine disease. So that has definitely had an impact on, you know, the family and putting a strain, obviously, on my husband, him already being a caregiver for me and the main financial, you know, support for the family. But one thing that I have been able to do with my disease is work in patient advocacy. Now, it's not a huge, you know, salary, but it does give my pain a purpose. And obviously working in the headache and migraine space, I am working with very empathetic people who understand the disease and understand that I can't always show up, you know, all the time like I would like to. But it is something that we definitely discuss frequently is the stigma behind migraine in the workplace, because it does affect people more so, you know, not just absenteeism, but presenteeism. Like, you know, you could be at work, but if you're in an active, you know, migraine, you're just not able to function like, you know, you normally do. It affects your cognition, affects your memory, affects your ability to concentrate. Then you have all these other factors that play a part, like your sensitivity to light, sound, if you're affected by nausea and or vomiting, any GI issues. So it's definitely something we talk about, and workplace accommodations are very important. And not everybody is comfortable in letting their employer know that they have migraine because one of the stigma, they don't want to be classified as someone who's not reliable, because of the stigma that does come with migraine. There's a lot of internal stigma attached to that as well. So, you know, if you do have employment and you do live with migraine, it can be kind of tricky depending on who you work for, your comfortability with your employer, whether or not they have certain things in place where you feel like you can get certain accommodations put in. So it's kind of like an individual basis. But I have seen people, you know, give stories of, you know, great employers that accommodate them. And I've seen people who've just had horror stories. So I think it depends on where you work, who you work for, and that individual's comfortability with disclosing their migraine to their employer.
So I do work in a traditional job. In fact, you know, often I'll work 12 or 14 hours a day. I haven't and, as of late, I haven't had any, issues with, an employer saying you can't, have time off for migraine. And I do know that, and I don't know if this is per state or if it's, federal, but when you are filling out your self-identification where it asks if you have a disability, migraines are listed as a covered and known disability under the Equal Employer and Disability Act. I know for the state of California. So if you do suffer from migraines, you can self-identify yourself as having a disability.
That's good to know. Thanks for sharing.
So my current boss is Phil, and he's very understanding.
All right, does anyone else have any questions for our panelists? I don't think I see any more in the chat. All right.
Or would anybody else like to share their experience?
Yeah.
That would be really helpful as well. Anybody else like to share their experience with treatments, and have they had a look at the HHP migraine real world data, and will they have any suggestions to do with it?
All right, if not, then I will turn it back to our panelists. Jamie, Liz, Kelly, was there anything that you wanted to have time to speak about earlier that we didn't have time to get to, or anything you want to add for our attendees today?
Oh, I think I covered everything I needed to. I really do appreciate, you having me here and talk about migraine, and it's a really great opportunity. So thank you again.
Yeah, and anyone who missed it, I put in the chat earlier the link to Jamie's blog. So I would definitely check that out if you're a migraine sufferer as well. You're very welcome, Derek. Liz, Kelly, did you have any closing remarks?
No, just, thank you for listening and giving me the opportunity. And I think with migraines, because they're so different in everyone, and we are all so different in what works for us, is really just finding out, what works best for each one of us. So you can, have a normal, productive life and be able to go out there, especially when COVID's open. I mean, it's like, we all can't wait. Yay, let's go get some sunshine.
Yeah.
I just encourage everyone to try to find a community around this, or even a subset of it. If, you decide works for you is yoga, find a community, and it helps to give some accountability to what you're trying to do, and just makes you feel better generally.
Great. Well, thank you guys so much for your time today and for speaking. I'm gonna check the chat really quickly because I saw a couple of just people saying thank you. And yeah, I do really encourage our attendees today to look through that migraine data. There's a lot, as Phil said, there's a lot of information, like 50 pages of that data that might be useful for you guys. So if anyone needs that information, you should be able to respond to the Zoom confirmation email, and it should go to me, and I can send you that link if you didn't get it.
Yeah, so, and also as well, I put my email address in there, guys. It's Phil with one L at humanhealthproject.org. So if, having had a look at the data, you have any suggestions, we are working to, evolve. Where we're trying to get to with the real world data is where it will be on people's mobile phones on an app, and it will be, instead of like a big long survey as it is at the moment, that it will be shorter questions, and then that as the system begins to get to know you, it starts to share information that from the artificial intelligence would be the most helpful to you based upon what it's learning as it goes along. So we're trying to move from a big long survey to where it's on your mobile, it's on an app on your phone, and it's intelligent and it's learning for everybody, and for everybody as individuals as well. In addition to that as well, we are working to where the Learning Academy that's relevant to that as well will be, will be suggested to people, that will be shown to them, including where we have localized versions. Like now, during this year, we will launch localized versions of our Learning Academy and patient advocacy training for UK, Ireland, and for the US. And our plan is to go on localizing to different parts of the world, but that will be Learning Academy, and also as well community options for people in around the world and local as well, so that people can can help each other, because I think what Liz was saying there is huge, that having people to talk to, having people just supporting each other is huge in learning how to manage learning how to manage migraine and other chronic conditions. I think that's huge. Teaching, learning from each other how to do that is huge. So yeah, so anyway, anybody who'd like to email any questions or suggestions, my email address there is in the chat, phil@humanhealthproject.org. Thank you so much, everybody. And thank you so much, Taryn, for leading the panel.
Yes, of course. And thank you again to our wonderful panelists and leaders in this area. And I hope everybody has a great rest of your day.